Hey, buddy, I'm almost done and we're gonna go for a really nice walk. Why does it say I'm offline, bro? Oh, but it still says I'm offline. Oh, streaming. Excelente. Um, so great. Alright, excellent. So hello my fellow risers, we are going to now do the conclusion, which I didn't know. It's only like 2 or 3 pages, so it's very, very exciting. And ba 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 ba. Great job. I'll give myself a little comment. Alright, now I think I want to see it on YouTube. Alright, ready to go. You know what I'm curious about is whether, what am I frozen right now? Streaming. What's my battery level like? Great, 100%. Why does it look like it's frozen on YouTube? Alright. Hit back, hit this. Okay, great, excellent. So, oh wow, thanks guys. See, someone said great stuff. Someone put a little weird frog emoji. Okay, are you ready? I'm sure you are. Let's hit it. So the conclusion. The central aim of this book has been to offer an empirically informed picture of the human mind and cognition. Throughout this book, we have claimed that human cognition and agency are imperfect in the sense that they fail to meet some ideal standards of cognitive performance and agency, such as rationality, Chapter 1, self-knowledge, Chapter 2, unity, Chapter 3. Wow, this is just like laying it freaking out. So we have the R, the S, the E, the W. So that's 4 of the 6 Warsaw illusions. He spent his first 4 chapters talking about 4 of the illusions I have in the Warsaw illusions. So validating. In addition, human cognition and agency can be imperfect in another sense. They can be adversely affected by so-called disorders of the mind, such as schizophrenia, Chapter 7, autism and psychopathy, Chapter 8. As we indicated in the introduction, however, we do not intend to sketch a bleak picture of the human mind. Rather, our claim has simply been that human cognition and agency are imperfect, and not that people are stupid or dumb. We do not endorse what John Kilstrom calls the people are stupid school of psychology, summarized in the quote below. People are fundamentally irrational. In the ordinary course of everyday living, we do not think very hard about anything, preferring heuristic shortcuts that lead us astray, and we let our feelings and motives get in the way of our thought processes. 2, because that was 1. 2, we are on automatic pilot. We do not pay much attention to what is going on around us and to what we are doing. As a result, our thoughts and actions are inordinately swayed by first impressions and immediate responses, and also free will is an illusion. Sorry, what has he gotten wrong so far? You, in your book, have literally established all of those things so far. 3, we don't know what we're doing. When all is said and done, our behavior is mostly unconscious. The reasons we give are little more than post hoc rationalizations, and our forecasts are invalid. To make things worse, consciousness usually actually gets in the way of adaptive behavior. What the fuck? Sorry, there's something in there that you disagree with? I'm sure you disagree with calling people stupid, but what in this paragraph, all of this stuff is well-established stuff. That's crazy. That's really frustrating. That's really annoying. That's really annoying. What in here is bad? That's crazy. And you said that as summarized below. I am learning about, well, actually what I'm doing is I'm preparing for a conversation with Professor of Philosophy at UIC. No, it is not the Bible. So I have a meeting with this woman on at the end of the month. I already had a meeting with her, and she asked me to read this book because the way she said it anyway was that she wants to hear my thoughts about it. So I'm reading this. By the way, and then next, if this stuff is interesting to you, I also have a meeting with this guy also at the end of the month. In fact, on the same day. So yeah, there you go. Questions of the Self, Philosophy of Psychology. Probably only the most important stuff that you could possibly... Oh, you are? Thank you very much. Wow. Wow, I wish I were fairer skinned so you could see how much that touched me. Okay, so I'm gonna jump back into it because we're just reading this and then we're done with the book. This is the conclusion. It's 4 pages. We only have 3 pages left. Okay, so throughout this book, we have been critical of both unwarranted optimism and unwarranted pessimism about human cognition and agency. For instance, in chapter 1, we resisted strong optimism about human rationality, i.e. humans are ideally rational, but we did not endorse extreme pessimism about it, i.e. humans are hopelessly irrational either. In chapter 2, we rejected strong optimism about self-knowledge being peculiar, i.e. self-knowledge is always peculiar, but we didn't endorse strong pessimism, i.e. self-knowledge is never peculiar either. Peculiar meaning that you have some like direct, special, a little bit magical access to your own thoughts. In chapter 6, we were skeptical about strong optimism about free will, i.e. humans are fully free and responsible for their actions all the time, but we were also skeptical about strong pessimism, i.e. free will is just an illusion, which of course I think is the case, and he did not convince me. So you can see that stream. I got pretty actually upset in that stream. We do not think that PASSP is supported by the available evidence, which is people are stupid school of psychology. Moreover, PASSP is committed to radical skepticism about rationality, which, as we pointed out in chapter 3, is self-defeating. No. 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 No, you rejected the self-defeating thing. Wait, was it in chapter 3? Or wasn't it in the rationality chapter, maybe? Oh, no, it is in chapter 3. The self-defeating rationality paradox. You said here on page 85, you said, Premise 1, the experimental psychology of reasoning reveals that human reasoning capacity in type 1 dominant context is not sufficiently reliable. And then you said, but now we see what's wrong with this argument. In particular, I gotta read premise 2. If human reasoning capacity in type 1 dominant context is not sufficiently reliable, then we should not trust the product of human reasoning capacity, including scientific findings and theories, and in turn the experimental psychology of reasoning. But now we see what's wrong with this argument. In particular, premise 2 is false. So, because even if human reasoning capacity in type 1 dominant context is not sufficiently reliable, human reasoning capacity in type 2 dominant context might be sufficiently reliable, in which case we might trust the product of human reasoning capacity, including scientific findings and theories, in a type 2 dominant context. I literally said it. I don't remember what chapter we were in. I literally said, it seems like he's completely forgotten that they're about how there are different processes and different subagents. I mean, obviously, he keeps going back to the type 1 and type 2, but it seems that there are parts of him, some of his subagents, that do not understand this. That's crazy. What did he just say? That's crazy. Oh, I get it. I get it. Radical skepticism would be that there are no good processes. I got you. Okay, my bad. Okay, very good, very good, very good. Okay, very good, very good. Because radical skepticism would be type 1 and type 2 are bad. Okay, I got you. My bad. Okay. If we are so irrational that even our best cognitive performance invites frequent mistakes in basic reasoning problems such as the Linda experiment, then there is no hope for us to carry out reliable and effective psychological studies which require the cognitive capacity for solving difficult and complicated problems in reasoning and statistics. Okay, I was way too hasty. But this undermines the trustworthiness of the psychological findings that allegedly support PSSP. Human cognition and agency are not perfect, but they are good enough for many purposes, including the purpose of doing philosophy and psychology through which people can learn about their own limitations. As Paul Bloom points out, psychological studies exploring limitations in human cognition and agency are in fact an indication of how smart people are. Really? That's so funny. But let me be hasty again because that's crazy. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but how many people are exploring the limitations of human cognition and agency out of the 8 billion people? The psychological studies of biases and errors illustrate irrationality, how things go wrong, how we are limited. But they also illustrate how intelligent we are, how we can override our biases. After all, we know that they are mistakes. Who does? Because I've talked to a lot of people, I've done a lot of street interviews, and I'm not nearly as optimistic as you are. I went to literally a neuroscience conference, and there were plenty of people that couldn't name a single error. So they aren't out here catching their errors on a daily basis. That's... Oh. It turns out that every demonstration of our irrationality is also a demonstration of how smart we are. Because without our smarts, we wouldn't be able to appreciate that it's a demonstration of irrationality. Do we appreciate that it's a demonstration every time it's a demonstration? Appreciate every time? Alright, anyway, we're gonna get through this. So, in chapter 2, we discussed various studies of self-knowledge that cast doubt on the idea that humans are self-knowing creatures. Still, through psychological findings and philosophical argumentation, people can achieve a better understanding of the nature and operation of their mind, which is what this channel is for, gang. Great. Such as a better understanding of how self-knowledge works and where its limitations lie. Understanding the limitations of self-knowledge enables people to compensate for those limitations with the tools that philosophy and psychology make available. A person might know why they made a choice if some of the relevant causal factors are opaque to introspection, but they can. Oh, a person might not know why they made a choice if some of the relevant causal factors are opaque to introspection, but they can fill in the blanks if they learn about common priming effects that are likely to have interfered in their choice. Which is the whole point of this channel, is to get people to learn about psychology so they can get to know themselves rather than just telling themselves stories, which is what you're doing when you introspect. Something similar is true about responsibility. In Chapter 6, we discussed the idea that people are not fully responsible for their implicitly biased behavior due to them lacking awareness of their implicit biases. However, this changes when people come to know about their likely biases based on the results of psychological studies. In other words, people can become more responsible for their implicitly biased behavior after they have had the opportunity to learn about implicit biases that they might have. This means that a person's acquisition of philosophical and psychological knowledge about limitations and biases can both improve their self-knowledge and extend their responsibility. Thus, although the limitations of human cognition and agency are real, it is important not to exaggerate their implications. It is important to remember that we can do something about those limitations, starting with an appreciation of the issues discussed in this book, starting with knowing about the implications. Was it implications? Yeah. Philosophical and psychological knowledge of one's, limitations, I meant. Philosophical and psychological knowledge of one's limitations might lead to developing ideas about how to overcome the existing constraints on one's cognition and agency. And also, the only reason I think, or a big reason, let's say, that type 2 processes tend to just act as the lawyer for the client that is type 1 processes is because this system, the brain, you, me, doesn't know that the type 1 processes are unreliable. The more we understand that, the more that the type 2 processes are going to play more, the more that the relationship is going to be more of a default interventionist relationship, as we talked about. Okay. Just want to repeat that because it's the conclusion. Great. So I'm just going to read this sentence again. Philosophical and psychological knowledge of one's limitations might lead to developing ideas about how to overcome the existing constraints on one's cognition and agency. For instance, people might be able to outsmart their biases after identifying them. Daniel Kahneman describes his own experience of the halo effect, which is the tendency to let one's evaluations of a person in one aspect or domain, such as being physically attractive, influence subsequent evaluations of that person in other aspects or domains. The halo effect is basically, you see someone as attractive, naturally, not a bunch of makeup or sexy clothing, but just naturally attractive. And there's an assumption somewhere in here that, they're probably competent and moral. Such as being competent as a coworker. Initially, when grading student essays, Kahneman was reading and evaluating all the essays submitted by a student before moving on to the next student's work. However, he realized that this way of grading can easily be biased by the halo effect. I began to suspect that my grading exhibited a halo effect, and that the first question I scored had a disproportionate effect on the overall grade. If a student had written 2 essays, one strong and one weak, I would end up with different final grades depending on which essay I read first. I had told the students that the 2 essays had equal weight, but that was not true. The first one had a much greater impact on the final grade than the second, which is obviously hugely important. Yes, my partner's dog is... you see him on video lying down, and then, that's my dog. And then my partner's dog is walking around here. As a result, you want to go over there to the camera and say hi? No? Okay. As a result, Kahneman changed his... Well, actually, she might be curious. Come over here. Hey, come over here. There you go. All right, down. Chill out. We're going to go for a walk soon. I'm almost done. Okay, as a result, Kahneman changed his grading procedure to avoid the halo effect, grading essay 1 first for all his students, before moving to grade essay 2. More generally, awareness of what biases a person has and how biases work can be the first step towards a reduction of those biases on that person's behavior. Knowledge of biases can also be advantageous in a distinct way. Instead of outsmarting biases or compensating for them, people can use those biases to achieve certain ends. The idea of nudges, developed by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, and they have a book called Nudge, is a good example of this strategy. To nudge people is to influence their choice by designing the context, choice architecture, in which they make choices in a particular way, without resorting to any coercion or monetary incentives. Effective nudges utilize, rather than outsmart, the patterns in which choices are based or influenced by contextual cues. As an example, in the context of organ donation, a government can adopt the rule that the default option is donate. That is, people are taken to consent to donating their organs unless they choose otherwise, because we have what's called the default effect. Whatever you present as the default effect, we are likely to go for that for energy efficiency, basically. I mean, if we have some trust. So they need to instead opt out if they do not want to be organ donors. This default rule is expected to increase the number of donors by utilizing psychological inertia. I wish they had put the numbers because they are impressive, i.e. the psychological bias by which people favor default options over non-default options. This default rule nudges people in a socially favorable direction because increasing organ donation saves lives by utilizing their bias in favor of default options. Our hope is that the discussion in our book and the sources in the philosophy of psychology that you have explored along the way will contribute to a better understanding of human cognition, and agency, and will change the way you think about your choices, emotions, beliefs, and actions. Knowledge of the strengths of and limitations of your mind is power. I don't want to say anything else. Those are fantastic words to end on, and that's that. We have finished. We started on the 7th. That is the fastest we have ever read a book. But of course, we were spending our entire day doing it. All right.